The whole LEGO sets that are surprisingly scale with each other thing has proven to be a lot more successful than I ever thought it was going to be. When I made the first few episodes way back when, I thought, this is going to be kind of a fun thing for me to do for myself as a nerd, because I like this nerdy kind of stuff. And it turned out that there were a lot of other people that did too, more than I thought existed for sure. And with a lot of people, there will always be some inevitable amount of confusion. I certainly do not consider myself to be the most articulate person ever, and so in the spirit of self-improvement, I just wanted to make this video and address the 3 most common types of comments that I'll see on the surprisingly scale videos and hopefully clear up some of that confusion. Starting with the one that I think most people do tend to understand is the fact that no, they are not always perfectly in scale with each other. If you've seen the series, you know at the end of every one there's a little caveat that says, so if this one was 2 studs longer or if this one was 3 studs shorter, then they would be perfectly in scale with each other. And every so often there will be somebody that says, so then they're not in scale with each other. By your own understanding, they're not in scale. How can you be claiming that they're in scale when you just said that they are not in scale? And the point of the series is to find LEGO sets that are so close to being scale with each other that you may as well just call them in scale with each other, because the human eye doesn't really tell the difference between 29 studs and 30 studs all that well. Like, for all intents and purposes, they are in scale with each other, because LEGO doesn't make sets with the intention of being in scale with other sets. They just make LEGO sets, and this series is all about finding the times when, hey, this is a happy coincidence that we've got here. I think that's pretty apparent to most people, but to the few that it isn't, then, yeah, there you go. The next thing that I wanted to address was the reflectability of 1 stud shorter or 2 studs longer or what have you. When I say something like, if this Falcon was but 3 studs shorter, that is not the same as that Mandalorian Starfighter being 3 studs longer. To illustrate what I mean, I'm going to throw out kind of a more extreme example. So let's say that you've got a LEGO Turbo Tank and a LEGO U-Wing that are each the exact same length, say 40 studs long. Now, in universe, the Turbo Tank is 49.5 meters and the U-Wing is just shy of 24 meters, but for our purposes here, let's just pretend like it's 50 and 25 on the dot. So if you want to make them scale, there are 2 things that you can do. You can either double the length of the Turbo Tank, adding 40 studs, or you can half the length of the U-Wing and subtract 20 studs. Clearly one of those options is a lot more optimal than the other, and that is going to be the one that I pick for the video. Now, obviously, it's never that extreme with the sets that I work with on the Surprisingly Scale series. It's always going to be a choice between, like, subtracting 2 studs versus adding 3 studs, and either way, like, it's still pretty close, but it's just nicer to pick the smaller one, you know? Although they can get pretty extreme when you're working with advent calendar builds. Like, for example, I once did Boba Fett's Slave 1 and the Imperial Light Cruiser, and the options that I had to work with were either take off 1/5 of a stud from the Slave 1 or add 18 studs to the Light Cruiser, and I'm like, well, 1/5 of a stud on one of them, I'd call that pretty scale, even if the other option is plus 18 studs. Like, there's only so much you can do when you're working with advent calendar builds. Anyways, the last thing that I wanted to talk about is the transitive ability of these things, and that's probably not a real word, but it is now. I just made it up. It comes from the transitive property that you talk about in your math class. Now, what I mean by that is, let's say you have set number 1, and set number 1 is almost perfectly in scale with set number 2. And set number 1 is also almost perfectly in scale with set number 3. That does not mean that set number 2 and set number 3 are close to being scale with each other. They absolutely could be, but there's no guarantee. Now, to illustrate what I mean, let's just say we've got 3 random sets: set A, set B, and set C. And for set A to be perfectly in scale with set B, you have to add 3 studs to it. So They're still pretty close, and you can basically call them scale, but there is a small 3-stud discrepancy. Now, if you want to make set B in scale with set C, you have to add 3 studs to set B. And so look at what just happened. A and B are out of scale again. So if we want to get them back into scale, then we'd have to add another 3 or possibly even 4 studs to set A. And now we've added a total of 7 studs to set A to get it to be in scale with set C. So while the 3 studs between A and B might not be that much, and the 3 studs between B and C might not be that much, the total of 6 or 7 studs between A and C is quite a bit. So again, that's not always the case. There are absolutely times where A and C are still just about in scale with each other, but there are quite a few cases where this problem is present, so just be aware of that. And anyways, that's just kind of something that I've been wanting to address for a little while now. I just finally found the time to make it, and well, thanks for watching. If you have no idea what I was talking about throughout this whole video, then click on the playlist on the end screen now. I hope that you'll enjoy it. And yeah, thanks to everybody for watching, and I'll see you around, I guess.